This is what Singapore looked like in the 1960s. And this is what it looks like today. Just decades ago, Singapore was a struggling fishing village, its economy rife with massive unemployment, low-skilled workers, and foreign trade barriers. But fast forward to today, and this little dot on the map has become one of the world's most prosperous nations. A transformation so rapid and radical, it left global economists scratching their heads. Singapore today stands shoulder to shoulder with economic titans, boasting a skyline that tells a tale of defiance and ambition. For a small country with limited natural resources, Singapore's economic success is extraordinary, often hailed as the most successful development story of the 20th century. But to what does this country owe its impressive economic transformation? This is how Singapore got rich. To understand this remarkable success, we need to look back at Singapore's unique history, starting with British rule. From 1819 to 1960, Singapore was under British colonial rule. Despite being a small island, it held immense importance for the British government due to its strategically advantageous geographical location. Positioned as a pivotal trade link between Asia and Europe, Singapore facilitated the transportation of goods from Asia to Europe, offering the British a vital gateway to conduct trade and commerce across these two continents. However, during World War II, when the British were unable to defend Singapore from the Japanese invasion, the people of Singapore felt let down and disappointed. This event triggered a powerful feeling of opposition to British colonial rule and a strong sense of nationalism among the locals. As a result, the desire for independence grew, leading to Singapore eventually gaining its independence. When the British regime ended, the Singapore economy was in ruins, and the newly formed government encountered a series of challenges right away. The British administration employed most Singaporeans, so their departure left a vast number of people without jobs, resulting in an unemployment crisis. This situation was further aggravated by the country's limited natural resources and made them rely on imports for basic needs like food and water, making the situation worse. Despite having recovered from the devastation of World War II, Singapore still bore the scars of the past. The city centre was overcrowded, buildings were deteriorating, and nearly 70% of the population lived in slums. And, on top of that, the economy was heavily reliant on trade, with little local industry to generate meaningful employment opportunities for the growing population. Faced with such dire circumstances, the founding leaders of Singapore devised a plan to salvage the nation's economy. One decisive decision they made was to join forces with the Federation of Malaya, North Borneo, and Sarawak in hopes of improving the country's prospects of economic growth and development. Lee Kuan Yew, one of Singapore's founding leaders, firmly believed that the merger would boost its economy. He thought combining a market of approximately 12 million people would help overcome the limitations of Singapore's small market size. Such a union, he envisaged, would foster the growth of local businesses, create employment opportunities, and generate income for the people of Singapore. With steadfast determination, Lee Kuan Yew worked tirelessly, and in 1963, Singapore officially merged with Malaysia. But this unification was short-lived. The 2 years Singapore spent as part of Malaysia were marred by social strife and political disagreements. As part of the Malaysia Agreement, Singapore had initially agreed to contribute 40% of its total revenue to the federal government. However, in July 1965, the Malaysian finance minister unexpectedly raised this contribution to 60% and hinted that unless Singapore agreed to pay more, it would create tension and likely result in them being forced out. But remember, at that time, Singapore's economy was still struggling, so its finance minister refused to comply. But that wasn't the only reason. Racial tensions also added to the complexities of the situation, as the Malays and Singaporeans struggled to assimilate with each other ethnically. Street riots and violence became all too common. With the Chinese outnumbering the Malay population 3-1, the Malay politicians in Kuala Lumpur felt concerned about their heritage and political ideologies being threatened by the growing Chinese influence in both the island and the peninsula. As a result, the Malaysian parliament voted to expel Singapore from Malaysia aiming to maintain a Malay majority within the country and limit the influence of communism. Once again, Singapore found itself standing alone. With an increasingly unsettled population and growing pressure to provide employment to its citizens, the Singapore government needed a solution fast. It wasn't liked all that much by its neighbours, so the solution could not involve them. Thus, they began experimenting with globalization, which meant the government had to explore opportunities beyond its borders. Luckily, Singapore's strategic location made this endeavour possible. You see, Singapore is located at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, which places it along major sea routes connecting Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. This positioning made Singapore a vital hub for trade, transportation, and communication in the region. With the Malacca Strait nearby, facilitating smooth maritime passage, Singapore began investing in well-developed port facilities and modern infrastructure to entice multinational companies and traders. Singapore's strategic location also made it a critical transshipment center for goods destined for neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. Many goods arriving at Singapore's ports were re-exported to other markets, boosting its economy even more. Additionally, the country's access to valuable resources like rubber, tin, and other raw materials from nearby countries laid a foundation for the development of industries, and this heavily attracted foreign investments. But there was a catch. To get companies from other countries to invest in Singapore, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew had to show that Singapore was a secure and profitable destination for business. As a result, tighter laws were enforced to create a safe and corruption-free environment while also maintaining low taxes. How did he manage to achieve this? During a time when many countries had high taxes, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew made sure that Singapore kept its taxes low. They even gave special tax benefits, like exemptions and holidays, to certain companies in the 1960s and 1970s. This attracted foreign businesses to invest in Singapore, leading to robust economic growth then and now. Singapore is currently known as a tax haven and a great place for companies looking to enter the Asian market. Besides the tax advantages, the government also took strong actions to stop illegal activities like corruption and drug trade. Lee Kuan Yew was determined to eliminate corruption, from businesses bribing government officials to ordinary people bribing officers. They introduced strict laws to make these activities impossible. For example, anyone caught in drug trade or serious corruption could face the death penalty as a severe punishment. Furthermore, under Prime Minister Lee's leadership, the People Action Party suppressed independent labor unions and merged them into a single group called the National Trade Union Congress, which the party controlled directly. Anyone who posed a threat to national, political, or corporate unity was swiftly imprisoned without much due process. Singapore's strict yet business-friendly laws became highly attractive to international investors. Unlike its neighboring countries, where political and economic climates were unpredictable, Singapore stood out as a stable and secure destination, especially in the trade sector. While these laws did spark debates regarding human rights and the rule of law, their economic effectiveness was undeniable. Just 7 years after gaining independence, Singapore transformed into a powerful magnet for foreign investors. As foreign investment flowed into Singapore, the nation began focusing on developing its human resources alongside its infrastructure. Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew understood that merely attracting companies wasn't enough. The workforce needed to be well educated and equipped with the technical knowledge and skills sought by these foreign enterprises. As a result, Singapore began allocating a significant portion of the government budget to improve its education system. The country set up numerous technical schools and collaborated with international corporations to train unskilled workers in fields like information technology, petrochemicals, and electronics. For those who couldn't secure industrial jobs, the government enrolled them in labor-intensive services such as tourism and transportation. This well-thought-out strategy of having multinational companies educate the local workforce paid off remarkably. In the 1970s, Singapore's exports primarily comprised textiles, garments, and basic electronics. However, by the 1990s, The country had successfully diversified its industries, engaging in wafer fabrication, logistics, biotech research, pharmaceuticals, integrated circuit design, and aerospace engineering. Modern-day Singapore also boasts one of the best education systems globally. Rankings published by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in its Program for International Student Survey have repeatedly placed Singapore in the top 5 highly ranked countries in educational outcomes. Not to forget, Singapore is also ranked as one of the best places to live in the world. That's if you don't mind the strict laws. So, what can we learn? Today, Singapore is a modern and industrialized society, where entrepot trade remains a significant pillar of its economy. The port of Singapore has risen to become the world's busiest transshipment port, surpassing both Hong Kong and Rotterdam. Remarkably, it is now the second busiest port globally in terms of total cargo tonnage handled, coming second only to the port of Shanghai. Beyond trade, Singapore's tourism industry is flourishing, attracting more than 10 million visitors every year. The city-state boasts a zoo, a night safari, and a nature reserve, offering diverse experiences to tourists. It has even ventured into luxury entertainment, opening 2 of the world's most extravagant integrated casino resorts, the Marina Bay Sands and the Resorts World Sentosa. Singapore's medical and culinary tourism industries have also gained prominence due to its rich cultural heritage and advanced medical technology. And, despite its small size and labor force of only 3 million people, Singapore still manages to achieve an annual GDP that exceeds $300 billion, surpassing the economic output of 3/4 of the countries in the world. Singapore also boasts one of the highest life expectancies globally, and is widely considered one of the best places to live on Earth. That's if you don't mind the strict rules. Considering its history, it might have been hard to imagine this small island, which couldn't produce basic necessities like food and water for its population, would eventually emerge as one of the most prosperous nations in all of Asia. Certainly, Singapore's economic success was not achieved overnight. It took years of deliberate effort and, to some extent, the people had to accept a certain level of reduced personal freedom in favor of a more authoritative government. However, this pragmatic approach by the Singaporean government proved that, in some instances, substantial government intervention in market systems could be an effective way to achieve economic growth. There's still so much we can talk about of how Singapore got wealth, and there's a lot I didn't include in this video. So, if you'd like me to create a more detailed video, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and until next time, have a great day.